Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy, and in this podcast, Blake and I are going to continue our 8-episode series in which we go team by team through the entire NHL, comparing notes on our projections for the 2024-25 season. Let's get it. And of course, I have your friend and my best friend, the man who not only cooks, he bakes. It's Blake Creamer. Blake, how are we feeling tonight?
Oh, yeah. Actually, fun fact. This is a nothing story. Oh my God. I once thought about going to baking school. That's my story. But that's terrible. Anyway, we'll edit that out later. That's fine. And nice to see you, my man. One thing I noticed, and I noticed this through the year too, our last season, Friday night shows, you and me are pumped. We're keyed up. We're like, let's get to business. And then on Sunday, we're like, all right, let's do this, right? We both got small kids, and these kids are insane. So that's fine. But buddy, I'm doing really good. This is going to be another really fun show. I love the last projection show we did. And we got some big stuff coming up this week, too, with Apples and Genos. There's more episodes, more content. So we're in the swing, and I'm feeling good about it.
Absolutely. I say we don't waste any time. We know this is likely to be a beefer once again, and we're here for it. But let's get to biz. Let's talk about Utah, the newest location for an NHL franchise. Obviously, this is the new location for the Arizona Coyotes franchise. Key departures here will run through Jason Zucker, JJ Moser, and Matt Dumba leave the team from last season. And key additions, obviously the big trade with Tampa Bay. They get Mikhail Sergachev coming to town. They get John Marino from the Devils, and they get Ian Cole as well. So a whole bunch of additions made to the back end as they really tried to focus on that this offseason. It's definitely like a weird offseason, right? Like how often do you have a situation like this where the team remains the same, but they're changing locations? Like I have to imagine some percentage of the players on this team are not thrilled about it going from Arizona to Utah. And like, how does that affect individual players? How does it affect overall team chemistry, new facilities, the whole 9 yards? I don't know, Blake. Do you think that any of that really matters for fantasy, or am I reading too much into it?
I'm sure that it does. I mean, we won't be able to quantify that, but I think geographically, leaving Arizona to go to Utah, it's not the best, but leaving a crappy organization to go to a potentially good one, maybe this could equal a rejuvenated team here, because this team has a lot of talent, and we'll get into that. But now they got an owner that actually gives a damn and has already made a pretty damn awesome trade, picking up Sergachev, or trade. Yeah, was he traded there? I can't remember. Yeah. Yep. So obviously doing some good stuff. I think there's some hope. There's a lot of hope, and there's some amazing young pieces here. With the rookie seasons out of the way, I'm low key into the Utah HC. Damn, they really dropped the ball on that one, but I like the color scheme.
Yeah, the color scheme is pretty nice. I'm okay with it. The name change, like, is it like the most exciting thing of all time? Obviously not, but like, I'm not gonna quibble about
Let's
hockey
quibble, Nate.
changing
Damn
names.
it! What the hell are they doing? You had the Yeti in there, and you went with Utah HC. We got a Yeti. That's beefy. I mean, hockey club. I don't know. Anyways.
All right. Well, regardless of our takes on the name of the franchise, they have kept some things consistent. Andre Torini returns as head coach here. I don't know if you'd necessarily consider Torini to be like a big net positive for fantasy purposes. I think overall he's fine. I think he's done what he can with the talent that he's had. I think the team could be poised to take another step, and this should be a little bit more of a true test for him as a coach. Can he really facilitate the next step for this team, or does it take a new coach to really elevate them to the next level as they try to get back in the playoff picture? That'll be interesting to see this year. I don't have any major notes on Torini as a coach and his effect for fantasy. Do you, Blake?
Nothing major. I mean, he's been a kind of he's the consequence of like a poor roster, right? So it's really hard to
Yeah.
judge what he's been able to do. But with some of these signings, like yeah, even Marino, I like. I always think Dan Marino. I always think Ace Ventura, Mister Marino. That's I don't know if you've seen that movie, Nate. Have you seen Ace Ventura? Just tell me you have.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh
I've
God.
totally seen it.
All right, we're gonna talk offline. You're definitely on notice. Anyways, one thing about Arizona is they're pretty damn good off the rush, and they're good at defending shots off the rush. So that's something that Torini is good, and I think he's got the roster to sort of lean into that as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
All right, let's get into the roster. Let's start with the power play unit here. They're definitely going to run a true top power play again. It's what they've been known to do so far. You've got Clayton Keller, you've got Nick Schmaltz, you've got Dylan Genter, who I would consider locked in after he really showed out in the back half of last season. I think that you can pretty much count on that. Would you have any arguments amongst those three guys being pretty much locked in to start the season?
Not at all. And we'll talk about Genther, but that's an exciting young player. And I do think he's a lock there because he's a pure shooter, and that's something they desperately need on that power play.
For sure. Now, where it gets a little bit interesting is the power play quarterback situation. Sean Dursey is the incumbent there. He had a decent season, I guess you could call it there. Definitely tailed off towards the end of the year. Wasn't alone on the
Yeah.
Coyotes in that respect, but definitely tailed off towards the end of the year. You have the big name trade bringing in Mikhail Sergachev, commands a huge contract. Like, obviously, there's some kind of name cachet when you bring in a guy like Mikhail Sergachev. Does that mean he goes straight to the top power play, or does Dursey retain that role? I think we might differ on this take a little bit, Blake.
I think we might. Oh yeah. I mean, again, this is to me. It kind of reminds me of the conversation we had about Hannafin and Theodore. A little bit. But I do think that these guys will cannibalize each other's power play minutes a little bit, and I think that Sergachev was brought in mainly to shore up the defense. And he's really good at that, right? And I've seen you say this before, like he's a better defenseman in all aspects. I agree he's a better defenseman, but I don't know about all aspects. I think Dursey actually has maybe a little bit on him offensively, and that's just some of the metrics that I dig into. But yeah, I'm not sure. I look at Sergachev, like he had 27 power play points with Tampa in 2022-23, and I think like is that just a product of his environment? Like what happens now when he's on a Utah power play that has nothing close to what Tampa was? Like they were number one in conversion, and have been for a long time, or upper level there. So, and then we saw what happened with Hedman last year. Like Sergachev, when he was healthy, didn't really get much of a chance on there. So I think they're bringing Sergachev in to be that minute munching defenseman, right? Like kind of a Mo Sider guy. And I think that Dursey is going to be the power play one guy based on his offensive acumen. So that's sort of where I'm at there. And we'll delve into those players a little bit more moving forward.
For sure. We definitely will. Yeah, for my side, I'm not really seeing metrics that suggest to me that Dursey's really any better at him in any facet. Um, we can delve into it a little bit more later once we go through with the actual numbers up there for either. But one thing that I tend to like to look at is the IPP, like what kind
Yeah.
of share are they getting of the power play, regardless of whether he's been on the top unit or on a different unit. Sergachev has been a consistent, like the lowest in the last 5 seasons in terms of IPP on that Tampa power play is 63+%. That's a really strong mark for a defenseman. Dursey last year on the Arizona power play, where it's not strong, so you would hopefully expect somebody who's making a difference to have a strong IPP, only at 42%. That's one metric to look at, the way somebody's impact rate on a unit,
Yep.
particular unit. But in my mind and the way that I have it projected, that was a consideration when they brought in Sergachev. They targeted him to potentially run this top power play unit, and that's the way I do have it projected. Lastly, here we've got Logan Cooley or Barrett Hayton for the fourth forward. I think obviously they're probably trying to get a center on this unit. Maybe take the faceoffs. You saw even Nick Bukestad get some time due to injuries mostly last year, but I think that if Cooley can be a faceoff guy, then maybe Cooley takes that next step this year. How are you handicapping this fourth forward spot, and is there another name that you'd suggest?
My initial thought is that they're gonna go back to the well with Hayton, but I think it'll be a little bit of a shorter leash because of what you said about Cooley, right? We don't know how he's trained in the offseason, how ready he's gonna come to the team here, and can he win some faceoffs, right? Like Hayton is pretty damn good defensively. That's something he's shown to do, on that line. Like he kind of anchors that line with his defensive play when he's up on the top line there. So I do think it'll be him, but I mean, Cooley is obviously offensively talented enough to do that. And I think it's the sexier pick to go on there. But I think what's probably going to happen is Old Faithful Barrett Hayton. Like one thing about Hayton too that he does really well is puck retrieval. And so that's something that's really important, obviously, on the power play. Like Cooley's just straight offense, dynamic guy, where Hayton kind of brings a few more of the intangibles.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Cooley a lot to potentially take a step and potentially grab that fourth spot at some time this year. But similar to you, I'm not convinced it's right out of training camp where they might opt for the guy with a little bit more experience and some history there playing with Schmaltz and Keller and being effective when he was healthy. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Right now, the way I have it projected is an even 2.5 minutes for both players on the season. Basically, just assuming that they'll probably start with Hayton, flip over to Cooley, and it'll end up evening out over the course of the full season. But obviously, for fantasy purposes, you're going to want to have the guy who's actually there at any given moment. All right, let's dig in now with these players. Let's start with Hayton up at the top of the lineup. I do think should be the betting favorite to center Keller and Schmaltz. Keller and Schmaltz ran really cold on the on-ice shooting percentage side of things last year. I really do think that they need a center who can kind of anchor that line the way you're saying, Blake, and that they would get a lot of benefit out of Hayton kind of being able to reclaim even a portion of the chemistry that they had in that run towards the end of the 2022-23 season. Mm-hmm. So I don't think Hayton needs to be a world beater for him to really help Keller and Schmaltz achieve their ceilings this year. He just needs to kind of anchor that line and provide them with enough stability, basically, to reach their potential. So I've got Hayton for 20 goals, 20 assists, 40 points. You've got him for 19 goals, 24 assists, 43 points. I think we're both seeing this pretty similarly.
Yeah, I don't really have too much on this guy. I do like Hayton a lot. He did have that amazing kind of back half, even the back quarter of 2022-23, where he had 18 points in 20 games, where the line was kind of popping off him, Keller, and Schmaltz. But I mean, then he started out the season pretty damn stinky. 4 points in his first 16 games. Something wasn't right. And he was getting a ton of power play time too. So he was just not converting. He was extremely unlucky and probably something else going on there. So I'm not expecting big things from Hayton this year. I do expect that maybe next year, like if he stays healthy this year, like I think he can build on what he's already done here. But now Utah has a lot more youth that is kind of coming up that are maybe going to eat into some of Hayton's minutes, especially Logan Cooley, right? Like that's his main threat, and it kind of squeezes Hayton a little bit. Like his development needs to go maybe a little quicker if he wants to stay really relevant in the top six there. But yeah, I mean, 40 points, I think that's pretty reasonable. He's going to be streamer level this year.
Yeah, worth noting, Barrett Hayton, still just 24 years old, probably haven't seen close to his eventual NHL ceiling. And at the very least, I feel decently confident in saying that he's going to be a strong middle six center, but definitely a guy that I think could provide like low end 1C numbers where you probably would feel better if he's not a 1C guy. But if he's kind of fitting the role, I feel similarly to the way like Joel Eriksson Ek provides good numbers playing with Kaprizov. I feel like Hayton can maybe be a budget version of that on the Utah Hockey Club here if things start to go well. Maybe that's not this year, but throughout his career, career, but I think ideally the the Utah Hockey Club is looking for Logan Cooley to be that guy sooner rather than later, really.
Mhm.
Before we get to Cooley, let's talk about Keller and Schmaltz. I've got Keller for 34.5 goals, 46 assists, works out to 80.5 points. You got him for 35.5 goals, 44 assists, about 80 points. So we're pretty much bang on in terms of what we see for Keller, and similarly for Schmaltz as well. 24 goals, 42 assists, 66 points for me. 24 goals, 44 assists, 68 points for you. Yeah, I think really they just need that stability. The on ice shooting percentage that they ran cold on last year should rebound, and you should see them in this range. I don't. I think this is pretty open and shut as far as I'm concerned. Do you have any major concerns in terms of variance that we could see for either of these players?
Not so much in the actual line. I think those lines are pretty set. Like, and we'll talk about the second line as well. But one thing that I have thought about when it comes to Utah is, does this line maybe get not deprioritized, but does the second line kind of bump up a little bit more and they do kind of a
Mm.
1A, 1B situation with the top six? Because you got guys like Dylan Genther, you got guys like Logan Cooley on that second line, even Lawson Krause, like he can play some big minutes. So yeah, it's just interesting. And you can never put it past the coach to like put the lines in a blender. Like, does Nick Schmaltz go down to the second line? Do they pop up Dylan Genther to play with Clayton Keller? Like, that would be pretty damn ridiculous. I mean, so they have some options. It's exciting, but I think like we're projecting the median here. I think we got to be safe, and it's a pretty safe line.
Yep. Feels similarly there, obviously. So let's talk about Cooley. This is the first guy that I'm kind of excited about on this roster. I think has some real upside from where we've got him projected. I have him for 23 goals, 28 assists rather, 51 points. You've got him for 25 goals, 30 assists, 55 points. A little bit hotter there right now, like we said, probably starting on power play 2, but definitely has upside to supplant Barrett Hayton sooner rather than later, and could even supplant Barrett Hayton on the top line and build some chemistry with Keller and Schmaltz.
Yep.
I kind of feel like Keller, Schmaltz, Cooley are all similar players in some respect, and Hayton is a little bit different in what he brings to the table to that top line, and so that's kind of why I've projected it the way that I have, and kind of expect Hayton to fulfill that role more often at even strength. But I'm definitely open to the fact that maybe Cooley is just by far their best center, and so he ends up kind of by default taking that over. I think Cooley had a slow start last year, but really started to turn it on. The underlying metrics started to tick up the end of last season, which is not something you really often see from a rookie player,
Yep.
especially one this young, and that's really exciting for me. So I'm actually quite interested in what Logan Cooley might do for an encore here. How about you, Blake?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this guy. Remember what he did in the preseason last year, where we're like, this guy's going to be rookie of the year.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't remember the team he was playing against, but just dangles the entire team, scores a beautiful goal, maybe even goal of the year. And it was in preseason. And then, yeah, I mean, had a very serviceable 44 points in 82 games. I love that he played all 82. I love that he had 15:49 average time on ice. This all bodes really well for Logan Cooley's development. And yeah, I think he's the center of the future there. But yeah, I like what you said too about the lines. Like if you put Logan Cooley up there with Schmaltz and Keller, like who's going to go get the puck? Like
Yeah.
these are all rush players. So like, and Genther's Schmaltz is like, he's a facilitator. He just facilitates shot assists, chance assists. That's what he does, but he's not a forechecker. Barrett Hayton is the forechecker, right? And on the second line, Lawson Krause is the forechecker. Like we got to get a guy getting the puck to these beauties. So I would be surprised if they put all them together, but I mean, I'm not a head coach, so that would be amazing if they did and if it worked, because this guy's got an insane ceiling on his career.
Yeah. Yeah, and worth noting too, like Hayton could be that guy if in like neutral game states, but
Hmm.
Cooley could be that guy if they're pushing for a goal at the end of
Yeah,
this
I
game
like
or
that.
something like that. There's definitely some extra ways that Cooley could, just get some valuable minutes at the end of games and stuff like that. So, yeah,
What
I
did you
just
project him for, Nate, for time on ice?
for time on ice, I had Cooley at 17 minutes 15 seconds. How
Oh,
about you?
bang. Yeah. No, I got 16 and a half, I think. So
All right.
I'd love to see more. That
Yeah.
yeah, obviously you get a player like this, get him on the ice for more, we're gonna get much better production, right?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, most of that was due to the fact that he was taking more ice time towards the end of last season. Um, it's definitely possible that Hayton takes more of that away from him if he does really click with Keller and Schmaltz, especially in the early going. But
Mhm.
I do think that they expect Logan Cooley to eventually be the guy that they want to give the most ice time to down the middle. All right, let's talk about Lawson Krause. He's been pretty relevant for fantasy. You know, he shoots, he hits, he does all these things. He scores 20 plus goals. He definitely flutters around the fringes of fantasy relevance and provides a little bit more than that even in bangers leagues. I've got him projected for 179 hits this year, so that's definitely a possibility. But yeah, I have him for 24 goals, 20 assists, 44 points this year. You got him for 23 goals and 20 assists as well for 43 points. So obviously, we're seeing this player pretty similarly as well. Do you think there's a real upside case for Kraus here, or is it more downside realistically from this number?
That's a good question. I mean, he's still in the wheelhouse, like he's going into his prime, and this is a guy that does stuff out there, and he's a valuable player for this team. Maybe not so much for fantasy outside of bangers leagues. So I think his floor is going to be solid because of the periffs. Like this guy got 175 hits and 60 blocks last year for a forward. That's excellent, right? That's really a player you want to have on your team. And Utah has a very good schedule this year in terms of off nights and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think his floor is probably pretty solid, like a 40-point floor and maybe a 50-point ceiling. I think that's where we're going with that. He's not getting a ton of power play time. He didn't last year. And now we've got, Genther and Cooley in the mix here, like maybe Josh Doan. I don't know. So I think this is kind of the player we're looking at here.
Yeah. Let's move on then to Dylan Genther. Posted his projection on X earlier this week, so if you might have
X.
already seen that at some point, but yeah, I'm pretty excited about Genther based on what he's able to do towards the end of last season. I have him for 27 goals, 32 assists, 59 points. You got him for 28 goals, 32 assists for 60 points. So again, we're pretty much in lockstep across this forward group here, Blake. What do you see as a true upside full breakout case for Dylan Genther? Could we see something even beyond that?
I mean, I've got him for 60, and I feel pretty good about that. Like, I think just efficiency. Because obviously the shots are there and the chances are there with Dylan Genther, and that's what we like about him. This guy he's elite at that. It might be the best player at in those statistics or metrics on Utah, right? In a limited sample size last year. So I think if he can convert more of that, yeah, well, then we're looking at as kind of a maybe like 40 goals. Ooh, I'm not saying he's going to get 40 goals, but I think that he has a 40-goal ceiling, maybe a 70-point ceiling, like a 40 and 30 kind of guy on this team. But again, he would have to start hitting the net and converting at a pretty elite rate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's likely, but I think there's at least a chance that, they decide to do some weird things with the lines and he gets up there with Clayton Keller at some
Yeah,
point. Maybe it's like it could even be like a Keller Cooley Genther line at some point, which might not fit together the best stylistically, but that would be a ton of offensive talent on
a lot
one
of fun.
line. It would be a lot of fun. Genther's a bit of an interesting study because he does have great shot rates across the board, but I have him projected for just 9.5% shooting percentage at even strength. If that ticks up in any meaningful way, then you do really have a 30 plus goal ceiling here because he's already shown that he can be really efficient shooting the puck on the power play across parts of 2 seasons at this point. So I feel pretty confident about that. It's really just whether he can, just be a little bit more efficient at even strength. It's hard to say how much of him being inefficient at even strength shooting the puck last year was line mates and how much was him. Yeah, it's pretty rare to have this big of a disparity between the power play shooting percentage and the even strength shooting percentage for me. And so that's another reason why I'm flagging Genther as a guy who could really go off and provide, 30, even 35 goals in a more ceiling scenario this year. And potentially push that 70-point pace in if everything breaks right, obviously. There is downside, like obviously the sample here is not huge on Genther. It's a good sample, but it's not the largest sample we've ever used to project a player.
Yeah.
So there's still large error bounds on the projection here, but there is definitely reason to be excited about what Dylan Genther could bring to the table this year to the Utah Hockey Club. Down the lineup, Matthias Michelli was the other guy we both projected. 19 goals, 39 assists, 58 points for me. 19 goals, 38 assists, 57 points for you. So again, we're pretty much in lockstep. I don't really feel like Michelli is a guy I'm going to get excited about. Like the points are there, yes, but the shots are not. He doesn't hit, he doesn't block, he doesn't do anything else other than kind of assist. And I don't think there's really a scenario with with the advent of Cooley and Genther and Hayton coming back full time. I don't really think there's a scenario where Michelli's on the top power play unit for any extended period of time. And so I think you're just left with a guy who is a really efficient player. I have his even strength IPP at 78%, like truly elite stuff at even strength. He really
Oh,
does
dang.
kind of, yeah, just take hold of whatever line he's on at even strength and generate a lot of the offense there. So that's terrific, but I don't think there's a realistic scenario for Michelli like on this current roster as constructed where he's, getting a whole ton of minutes on the power play that could really elevate his overall stock for fantasy. I don't know if you've got a more bullish case for Michelli here, Blake.
Not really. I mean, I think we're kind of in the same vein here. I think I projected him for less than you, but I do like the bones of this player. But like you said, it's opportunity, and there's so many guys on this team that are kind of knocking at the door. I just don't. I think Michelli's going to be left out there. That said, I mean, he does have some pretty elite, like again, zone entries. He drives the offense, like you mentioned, with the high IPP there, and he's a great facilitator of offense, right? Chance assists and shot assists. He does that well. And in zone stuff, he's really good at that too. So it's neat when I find players like this. Like, I yammer on about the microstats a lot, but it just opens up a whole realm of people like during the season, we look at Matthias Michelli and we're like, why the hell is this guy doing this? Or Dylan Strome, why is this happening? Casey Middlestat, what the, no. But like you've said before, you kind of rewind back from a goal and you're like, oh yeah, he's actually setting up a lot of shots, or he's setting up a lot of chances that don't go in, right? That the metrics don't cover that. So it's just another piece, another layer that we can look at. And Matthias Michelli kind of shows out at that. He's facilitating a lot of offense that, he needs his teammates to convert, right? And if he's on the third line, probably not going to convert too much, and second power play. So that's sort of where we're at.
Yep. Yeah, I do think the most realistic scenario for an upside case for Michelli involves a Clayton Keller injury. So, maybe that's a scenario that you could get a little bit interested in. You could potentially naturally slide into Keller's role on the power play and on the top line, and maybe
Yep.
that's a little bit more exciting. But as it stands with the roster as constructed today, I don't think there's a strong case to be drafting Michelli in September. Just noting here, Bukestad had a couple of decent weeks for fantasy last year when he's on the top power play. I don't think you should really expect anything long term from Bukestad. Josh Stone had a nice little run. I think he played 11 games or something along those lines.
Yep.
Yeah, 11 games and netted 5 goals and 9 points in those 11 games. So he had a nice little run there. Pretty tough to extrapolate a huge
Yeah.
amount from that, but he did have good underlying shot rates, so definitely a player that I'm going to keep an eye on. Again, feels like the team is pretty set through the top six, and it would take like a pretty strong outing from Doan in training camp to really unseat somebody in that top six. But
Yep.
I'm at least open to it given the very small sample we saw of him. Anybody else among the forwards, Blake?
No, nothing. You've mentioned them all. Josh Stone's an interesting one, but yeah, when he might actually get drafted just because of his the sample size, right? They're like, wow, he's almost point per game. I mean, pump the brakes, everybody. It's a great story because of obviously who his dad is, but I'm not really expecting anything there. Bjugstad he's going to be a great streamer this year. He's a beefer. He hits. He like what did he get last year? Like 20 goals. I mean, that's a quiet 20 goals. I have him on the A&G Dynasty team that I'm on, and I just couldn't drop him. I'm like, I don't need Nick Bjugstad, but he was doing stuff. So that's fine. I'll just keep him on my team, and I'm bringing him back for one more year. Buddy, you're on notice. All right, you better do something.
Yeah, had a solid season, 22 goals, 45 points in 76 games. Was definitely the best season of his career by a fair margin. I guess he did have that one season where he had 49 points in Florida, but that was, 6 years ago at this point. So not a guy that I expect will be calling his name out too often, but there are a couple defensemen here that are definitely worth checking out. And so yeah, let's really dig into it now. I guess let's start with Sergachev and what you've got him for. Obviously, I think the biggest discrepancy between us is going to be on the power play. I have him for 20 power play points. What do you have him for?
Sergachev for me, I've got him for 15 power
Okay,
play points. Yeah.
so only five different there. Yeah, across if you look across our overall projections, I've got him for 9 goals, 45 assists, 54 points with the decimals, it rounds up to 55. You've gone for 8 goals, 39 assists, and that leads to 47 points. So most of that on the power play, 5 power play points difference between us, but definitely there's still some discrepancy at even strength. Then Dursey, obviously, the other half of this equation that we're looking at. I've got him for 9 goals, 27 assists, 36 points. You've got him for 10 goals, 36 assists, 46 points. So you've got it much more even between the two here. What do you have for the even strength time on ice for these two guys, Blake?
Similar. So yeah, 1845 for both. That's kind of,
Okay.
yeah, even
So
across
I've
the board.
definitely given Sergachev a bigger share there. I've got Sergachev at 1915 and Dursey down at 18. I think Dursey on the right side. I think John Marino takes some minutes there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's my personal take after looking through it. I mean, Dursey skated 1811 at even strength last year. I don't really see with the additions that they made this year that he's going to get a bigger share all of a sudden. I don't think that's a step that I'm willing to make logically. Whereas, yeah, just the capital that they sent to acquire Sergachev makes me think that they're willing to give this guy a full number one defenseman role, and that's why I've got him up to 1915 there. He got up to 1859 was his highest season for Tampa Bay in 2022-23. So it's not like he's been far off from that number already in Tampa Bay, obviously behind Hedman there. So yeah, I don't think like I'm overstepping too much there, but that's definitely where we're getting some of the difference in our projection. The one I guess the thing that I'm looking at the most when it differentiates between the two players is I don't think Dursey. We have a smaller sample size on Dursey for sure. He's only realistically given us parts of 3 seasons, 64 games in 2021-22, then had 72 games for LA in 22-23, and then 76 for Arizona last year.
Yep.
Um, his highest IPP at even strength was actually with LA when he had 42% IPP in a more secondary role there. Then went down to just below 35% for Arizona last year. For a defenseman that I'm projecting for, to have a offensive impact, somebody that I want to get excited about for fantasy, I want a defenseman who, when presented with not so great things in front of him, is actually taking a bigger share of the offense. It seemed like Dursey took a step backwards in that regard, and actually needed the maybe the structure of LA or the players around him in LA to really produce even strength. I don't know if you see that differently. Blake, obviously, it's two different scenarios. Was probably asked to do things a little bit differently when he came to Arizona. But what do you have his IPP for at even strength for this year? And maybe you can talk us through what you see at even strength for Dursey.
Yeah. I bumped it up a little bit. So what he had last year was 34.7. That was his IPP at even strength. I bumped it up to 38.
That's
So
what
which
I've
I
got.
which I feel is pretty damn reasonable, right? Like I feel like last year, it was his first year in Arizona, right? He's trying to figure things out. I mean, he played 76 games, so it doesn't take that long to figure things out. But I mean, you look at the team as well in front of him, right? They're not blowing the doors down in terms of their roster construction. So I think a drop in IPP made sense from his time in LA going down to Arizona, right? But now he's got a season under his belt, and I feel like it's probably somewhere in between what he was able to do in LA and what he was able to do last year. So I got 38 there.
Yeah, I've got 38% as well. So I don't think we're off too far there. Overall, I think it really does mostly boil down to the power play role and what they get there. I've got Sergachev for 3 minutes on the season, Dursey for two. I assume you have that pretty much the reverse.
Kind of, yeah. I've got like 2 minutes 55 seconds for Dursey and 2:15 for Sergachev.
Okay. Yeah.
So
The other thing I guess that I'll say about the relationship between these two and what you might want to do in fantasy is the upside case for Sergachev in my mind is a lot higher. Going all the way back, was a high pedigree defenseman coming out when he was drafted, got traded for Jonathan Drouin, which I'm sure is a trade that the Montreal Canadiens still regret to this
Yeah.
day. But
Ouch.
um, Sergachev has the potential to just be that multi-category stud if he does get the top power play and does perform well on it. And yes, he's been on Tampa Bay, but the thing that I keep coming back to is he had that high IPP, not only on the power play, but also at even strength. Like he was consistently in the mid 40s for the IPP at even strength on Tampa Bay, which is obviously a much better team than Arizona has been at any point. And so I do feel like Sergachev inserts himself into the offense at even strength more than Dursey has ever done, even in that one season in LA that he had a solid underlying numbers.
Yep.
Obviously, Dursey could still take a step, still a young player, only just finished his third season in the league. So that I'm not saying that he can't do that. But yeah, I would have hoped to see him show out a little bit better, I guess, in the underlying metrics to really sell me on the fact that he could take that step this year. But that's primarily, I guess, what I would say I'm looking at when I'm saying that I think Sergachev is the better all around player at all facets of the game.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of who I'm drafting first, it's Sergachev 100% out of, or 100 times out of 100, right? But again, it goes down to like the Shea Theodore and Noah Hannafin thing that we talked about last episode. It's like, yeah, I don't want to reach for Sergachev, or I don't think where he's being drafted is going to be value, but I do think where Dursey is being drafted is going to be value, and I think there's a good chance that he does get that deployment. And you made a really good point about his even strength ice time. I think I might have to look at that because, yeah, it. Why would it go up that much? Like I could see 18, but I think so we could probably shave a couple points off there. But I look at the season Quinn Hughes just had and who his partner was, Philip Hronik, right? You get a guy in there. Like I think that Sergachev is going to be the defensive guy and Dursey's going to get the green light to jump in the rush. And I think that they're going to play together. That's sort of my thought on what's going on there. So I think having Sergachev with Dursey is going to unlock Dursey's offense a little bit more. And Sergachev's still going to have a great season, right? Because of all the reasons you mentioned. But that's sort of my thought there as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see what the pairs look like. I could see Sergachev playing with Marino or Dursey.
Yeah.
Probably just depends who Torini is feeling like he wants to roll with at any given time. So yeah, lots still to be uncovered here for Utah, but I think it is one of the more interesting discussions that we'll have. And yeah, I'm just thinking that the upside cases with Sergachev, even if Dursey gets the top power play, I'm not sure that it's much greater than what we saw last year, which was decent at the start and then tailed off in a big way. And so I'm just finding it hard for myself personally to get excited about that. All right, top three targets. Let's wrap it up here. For myself, Dylan Guenther has to be the top target, Sergachev the second, and Logan Cooley the third. I think the reasons are pretty self-explanatory. I think we've beaten these particular horses to death on our run through here. Blake, who do you got?
I got Genther first, just a player I'm very excited about, obviously, and at right wing as well. That's really nice. And I put Dursey there for the reasons I mentioned, not because he's a better defenseman than Sergachev or even that he'll have higher production. I put Dursey there because I think you'll be able to get Dursey at value, and I don't think you'll be able to get Sergachev at value. That's my thought there. And then Matthias Michelli, I put him out there because damn, I projected this man for 57 points or whatever the hell, and he's on the third line, second power play. So, that's kind of just a little bit of an upside case. We've talked about left wing being a little bit sparse this year. And I mean, this is a guy that's going to be available at the end of your drafts, right? But obviously temper expectations. It's a flyer pick at that point, and you probably need an injury to somebody up the lineup for Michelli to really reach, some good heights there in fantasy.
Yeah, Definitely a team that I think has a lot of upside and downside generally. Like you could see this team kind of go belly up in the new location in the first year and things go sideways quickly. But I mean, you also have the upside case, another step from Cooley, another step from Genther,
Yeah.
solidified decor. This team could take a real significant step forward this year, and I wouldn't be shocked by that either.
Are they making the playoffs, Nate?
If you if I have to call it today, I would say no, but it would
Oh,
not shock
no.
me. All right, let's keep rolling. Let's talk about Toronto. Nobody likes this team, including myself, most days, but they did lose some key players. Well, really, just Tyler Bertuzzi could only be considered the one key player here. They did lose TJ Brody, but he was actually getting scratched by the end of the year.
Yep.
Has definitely fallen off a long way from his best work in the NHL. The key additions here, mostly on the defensive side of things. Chris Tanev signs a big deal to come and be Morgan Riley's top pairing partner. Should should solidify things. Maybe that means some upside for Riley there. But the other defenseman they acquired, Oliver Ekman Larson, we saw him play some top power play minutes for Florida at times last year. Could that mean, could that mean that Riley gets bumped off the top power play? We've been through this song and dance with it feels like 6 different players and Riley on the top power play. We'll get into that as well. And then Anthony Stolarz, the goalie acquisition to form a tandem there with Joseph Wall. Uh, of these three guys, any of them spiking your fancy for fantasy purposes, Blake?
It's weird. I mean, I would say Oliver Ekman Larson if he gets power play one, but that's still not that exciting to me. We saw what that looked like in Florida last year, and then it's been only as of late where people are talking about Anthony Stolarz to me as like an actual viable option for fantasy. Like to me, I'm like, oh, they're bringing in a backup for Joseph Wall, but a lot of people don't share that opinion, and so I'm interested to hear what you think about Anthony Stolarz and what you think the Leafs goaltending situation might look like this year.
Yeah, just briefly, like we're not doing any projections here on the goaltenders. We're not really in that business as hashtag zero G fanatics, but from everything that I've heard this offseason, it really does seem like the Leafs management loves Joseph Woll. They want him to stay healthy. They've mentioned that in the postseason press conference where they introduced Craig Berube. They really want Joseph Woll to be the guy, I think. But I think they also realize that they need somebody else alongside him and they don't want to overwork him. And I think that's what Stolarz was brought in to do. Stolarz had a really nice year last
Yep.
year. And so he definitely purports to be somebody who can take a 1B role. And, if I had to, put an over under on number of starts for Wall versus Stolarz, I think it's like a 55-45 kind of situation. I think it's pretty even by the end of things, but definitely Wall should be the opening night starter and get first crack at things. All right, coaching change obvious here. Sheldon Keefe is out after successful regular seasons with the Leafs en masse, but Craig Berube comes in, and this will be interesting for sure to see what he tries to do with the Leafs, how he leaves his stamp on this team. It was pretty interesting. The more I dug in, the more confused I got
Yeah.
about Craig Berube and his potential impact on this. Like for years in St. Louis, he held down the even strength top time on ice for his top players, played with two power play units at times. Can't really see that happening in Toronto with the amount of money they're paying the top guys. I'm not really thinking that that's in the cards. Honestly, early in 2023-24 last year with St. Louis was the best that his top players ever played in terms of shot generation and suppression. Like they're actually under the hood performing really well, but the team was not performing and eventually got him fired. So, yeah, like mentally, what does that do to him as he enters Toronto? Is he going to even try to go like a little bit lower event hockey with this team? The Leafs scored a ton at even strength last year, but they also gave up a ton at even strength.
Yep.
Obviously, that's why they prioritize the defense this offseason, but there's just a lot of questions in my mind about what Berube might decide to do and how he might change things up from the way that Sheldon Keefe ran things. I think they want a new voice, they want a new direction, but the actual effect on fantasy still remains to be seen for me.
Yep, I agree with all of that. And you mentioned something there that it totally describes what I know Craig Berube to be: low event hockey. God, I mean, St. Louis was a graveyard for fantasy at times, right? Like, they're like the Canucks in the playoffs. Like, oh, we just won a game 2-1, and we got outshot like 42-19. So what's going to be interesting and hard to predict for fantasy is the St. Louis Blues team is not at all like the Toronto Maple Leafs team. I mean, he's got some of the best players in the world, the best shooter in the world by far, like in Austin Matthews, right? Like, how is what he was able to do in St. Louis going to translate over here? Like, it's really hard for me to wrap my head around that. And then throw in the fact that I think this guy's a bit of a dingus. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of his shtick, So is he going to piss off some of these guys? Like, Marner's already on the bubble, just, by whatever he did in the last few seasons. And, all these guys can be kind of prima donnas at times, and it's hard to manage big stars like this. So I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect, but I'm hoping that it's not a huge change from what Sheldon Keefe did here, just shore up the defense, which they did just by adding players to their roster.
Yep, definitely. We'll have to see what goes on here, and I wouldn't want to make any grandiose proclamations, try to go too far away from what they did. Like, I don't think their even strength play was bad. I think the players dictated a lot of how much offense was being scored, but I do think that Brube will have new systems, and that may take some time to get used to for some players. He may try to exert some coaching dominance over some players who don't buy in early on. There's
Yep.
definitely a lot of subplots that you could see, and it'll all be magnified 10,000 times because it's Toronto.
Oh,
But
God.
we will see what that looks like as we get into the season. Let's talk about the power play. Feels pretty cut and dried, obviously. You've got Matthews, you've got Nylander, you've got Tavares, you've got Marner locked in. Really, the only question here is OEL or Riley for the top power play quarterback. As you mentioned, Riley has been set aside, and it seems like pretty intentionally, just because he was like the only defenseman worth playing any amount of time in Toronto for so long that they really wanted to just let him focus on the even strength minutes and that he could eat, and let somebody else take the power play duties. And it's not like Riley has been like an amazing power play quarterback. He's been very serviceable, but mostly I think people would say he's been a little bit more of a product of the other players on that power play than really being a strong contributor to that power play. So I don't think it's impossible that OEL takes top power play here, but I think you have to at a baseline, think that Riley gets first crack and probably second and third crack as well.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think OEL is an insurance policy. Whereas I guess when they signed the Klingon John Klingberg last year, that was not an insurance policy. They're like, yeah, we want Klingberg. We want him to run our power play. Why? Why are you doing this? But I do really believe that OEL, won the Stanley Cup, and now he's kind of sailing off into the sunset with another pretty damn good team. And he's there to pick up the pieces if Riley fails. But it's got to be Riley. It has to be.
All right. Let's move on then. Let's dig into the differences in our projections here. Austin Matthews across the top, both of us not really projecting him to take much of a step backwards under Berube, if at all. 65 goals, 40 assists, 105 points for me. 65 goals, 46 assists, 111 points for you. Yeah, I can't imagine really a scenario in which Austin Matthews, face of the franchise, is deprioritized under Craig Berube unless he really does something to piss Berube off in the early going. I think Matthews is that dude, and you really just have to expect that he continues business as usual, whoever the coach is at any given moment.
He does it all, man. He's such a fun player to project too, because the numbers come out and you're like, dear God, 65 goals. Like, and he could get more. I really think, like, remember that last game when he was trying to get 70? Like, what did
Yeah,
he have? Like 15 shots on net. You're like, and it didn't even seem that weird. You know what I mean? It
yeah.
was just like he just turned it on. You're like, okay, what the hell's wrong with this man? So if he's healthy and his hands are good, I mean, we're looking at 60 goals floor.
Yeah. The other player that I have currently slated as my best bet for the top line left wing slot is Max Domi. He re-signed this offseason in Toronto. He did his best work by far in that role on the Matthews line towards the end of the season.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've got him for 11 and a half goals with 38 assists. 49 points is what it comes out to for me. You've got 12 goals, 31 assists, 43 points. This is the player that we have the biggest difference on. I'm just projecting, I think, more exposure to Matthews and Marner, the top line, basically here for Domi. Obviously, no top power plays in the cards, although I do think that he's most likely the next guy up if there was an injury to any of the other forwards. But yeah, I just think that Domi gets, I don't think it'll be the entire season he spends as the
Mhm.
top line left wing, but I think he maybe spends 50 to 60% of the season in that slot, and that's enough to get him to this projection.
Yeah, I mean, what is your projection here? Like 40, 49
49.
points? 49? Yeah, I mean, I've got him for 43, so it's there. That might bookend it, right? I think Domi is an insurance policy as well, right? They've got some young guys like that don't really need to do much on those lines. Like you got Bobby McMahon, you got Matthew Nyes, guys that can play on that line and have played on that line. And I mean, also with a new coach in here, like, yes, Domi did play with Austin Matthews towards the end of the season, but now we got a new coach in here. So he's going to do whatever he wants to do, right? And I do think that Domi, he's a great rusher. He's great with his entries and chances and all that stuff. They need to beef up that third line. Without Domi on that third line, it's like, we got a top six, and you might as well just keep the top six out there the whole time and have the other guys be cheerleaders on the bench, because the bottom six in Toronto is heinous, especially without Max Domi. So that's sort of what I'm looking at. But again, I agree. Domi has some residual value there, because if there's an injury, I think makes the most sense to move up the lineup.
All right. Mitch Marner next up. I've got him for 32 goals, 68 points, or 68 assists, 100 points. You have him for 30 goals, 73 assists, 103 points. I'm kind of into the train of thought that there could be like a Mitch Marner revenge tour this year. Like,
Love it.
honestly, if you're one of those Leafs fans who like hates Mitch Marner and thinks he's everything that's wrong with the Toronto Maple Leafs, then I think you should buy that he's going to have a monster season this year and really kind of stick it to the management and like command another massive contract and maybe leave in the offseason. Like, if that's who you think Mitch Marner
Yeah.
is, then you should be into this narrative that he's going to absolutely go off this year. So, yeah, I think he's a player who should be around 100 points. He's never actually crested that mark in a single season, but he's definitely paced for it a few times before. So I think this is a relatively safe 100-point projection for Mitch Marner. And I do think that just because of the narrative and how public it is in Toronto, I think that he's slipping a little bit in drafts this year. You can get him maybe towards the back end of the second round. And I think that that's probably a mistake. He's probably a guy who's going to score 100 points. And how often are you really going to find that in the back end of the second?
Yeah, absolutely. Draft this man with confidence. Like he had a high ankle sprain, and he comes back in the playoffs because it's the playoffs, and that's what hockey players do. And people are like, "What are you doing, Mitch Marner?" They're sitting there with their belly hanging out, and you got the chips, the crumbled chips on top of your, man boobs, and you're yelling at Mitch Marner. Are you kidding me? This he's elite. He's a 100-point player if he plays all 82 games and he comes in healthy. So obviously, I love the environment, and he's underrated defensively. He's a great player. I have no issue with Mitch Marner, and exactly like you said, there's a narrative around this player, so that means value for us in fantasy season.
Absolutely. Next up, John Tavares, 33 goals, 44 assists, around 77 points for me, 31 goals, 40.5 assists, and 72 points for you. I think Tavares is going to be a sneaky value this year. He was definitely moved down in terms of the even strength deployment by Sheldon Keefe. I don't think yeah, you talked about the bottom six here looking pretty rough. It does look rough. I think this is the last year of that contract for John Tavares. Like, I think Berube is gonna let him cook a bit at even strength, get him his minutes back up. Even like one more minute at even strength could definitely see him, approach a point per game. He was really, really good at generating chances, among the league's best at generating chances, particularly on the power
Yeah.
play. Just had a tough shooting percentage through most of last year. I really don't see a strong scenario here where we look back and John Tavares kind of disappointed to the extent that he did last year. So that's my current take on the player. How do you feel, Blake?
Yep. A bounce back's in the cards for sure. Everything under the hood is awesome with this player. I mean, he's lost a little bit of a step, but who cares? Like, he's playing with amazing players, and what he does really well. So I mean, you look at his power play numbers too. Like in 2022-23, this guy had 39 power play points. All right. And then last year, 20 power play points. I think there's room to grow there, right? I mean, I projected him for 25 power play points. That's just an easy 5 points right off the bat that I think he should get. And then, yeah, if he can get his shooting percentage up a little bit at even strength, like I think 72 points, 70 to 75 points, that's where John Tavares lives this year. And you got to bank on the shot and chance generation. And I don't think that's going away.
Yeah. Matthew Nyes, the projected left winger for me on that second line. We're still waiting for Nyes to take a step. Honestly, I was hoping that we'd see something underlying suggesting that he was headed that way. Haven't seen it yet. So I have him for a 16 goal, 22 assists, 38 point season. You have him for 18 goals, 20 assists, 38 points as well. I think we might just be looking at a guy who's just a chronic middle six winger. We're excited about the upside. You see the flashes where you're like, man, if this guy
Yeah.
ever does figure it out, then he really could be something. Still think that's a possibility, but it's not one that I'm willing to bank on at this point. The shot generation has just never really been there for him, and I'm not convinced at this point that that light's ever going to turn on. But that being said, I will keep an eye on this player because, yeah, there is a top six left wing spot up for grabs for sure, and Nyes is the most likely guy to hang on to that spot.
Yeah, it's hard when you're playing with guys like Marner and Matthews. I mean, you are not needed to do that, right? This might not even be the players that Matthew Nyes is, but if he wants to stick on that top line, like you're not rushing in and just taking shots off the rush or like blasting shots. You're giving it to Matthews, right? Because he's the best goal scorer in the league right now. So, I mean, I don't know if we even have an actual like idea of the type of player Matthew Nyes is. I think he's kind of shaping his game to fit on that line, right? He's playing a role. So that said, I do think there's some, there's some excitement there just in terms of his opportunity. And he's great in category leagues as well. This guy bangs, he does that. But yeah, I mean, a 38-point projection or whatever we have here, he's not blowing the doors down. I think some injuries need to happen for us to care too much about Matthew Nyes.
All right, moving along, we've got William Nylander.
Oh
Obviously
yeah.
had a massive season last year, getting up to 98 points. This year I've got him for 39 goals, 55 assists, 94 points. You have him for 41 goals, 54 assists, 95 points. I feel like this is who Nylander is. I can't really expect him to go above and beyond that career season last year, but I think this is a player we should feel really good about. Do you buy any of the potential narrative that Berube, as one of these like hard ass coach types, might get behind Nylander at some point and like try to teach him a lesson or something? I don't personally buy that at this point. This is a guy with a massive contract that he's signed now. Like he's got more weight behind him than I think Berube does in that room.
Yeah, obviously Berube doesn't give a crap about this stuff. I mean, I remember him calling out Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, his two, guys locked in for 8 times $8 million contracts, and he's just laying into him, like he doesn't give a damn about his job. Thanks for the authenticity, my man. Maybe keep it in house, all right, you dingus. But yeah, I mean, William Nylander, this guy's a lock. He's just getting better and better. And yeah, like you said, I don't really think there's much more than what we've seen from him. But another 98-point season, like what do I have him for? Yeah, 95. I think it's in the wheelhouse if he stays healthy, which this is a player that, yeah, he's only missed one game in 3 seasons. So you feel good about that. You feel great about the power play points. I mean, this guy's amazing. And he's got a beautiful forehead.
Beautiful head of hair too.
Oh, big time flow.
Let's keep rolling. So we did both do Bobby McMahon. He had an interesting kind of end to the season where it seemed like he couldn't stop scoring for a week or two there. Uh, does have good underlying shot rates. I don't know that the efficiency is going to be anywhere near that once again. I have him, I think, for 9.1% shooting percentage. That leads to 18 goals, 13 assists, 31 points for me. 19 goals, 15 assists, 34 points for you. Could be a guy who gets up the lineup, could play as the left wing, even on like the Matthews line. Like that's a possibility. Maybe as the forechecking guy, the go bang in the
Yep.
corners. Maybe
Yep.
he's the new Zach Hyman, who they've been looking for since Hyman left. I tend to discount that. I don't think he's quite that level of player. He's never shown that at any level really prior to this. But I do think he's probably the best of the complementary pieces there in Toronto. Nick Robertson, the other one, but it seems like he's kind of disgruntled. He's asked to be traded. He still doesn't have a contract for the upcoming
Yeah.
season, a restricted free agent. So I do think Robertson is a guy who can score, but it doesn't seem like the Leafs are really willing to give him an extended look in the top six, which is basically what this player needs to be. He's not a guy you can play in the bottom six with a bunch of grinders and expect him to really contribute in a meaningful way. And it doesn't seem like the Leafs are all that interested in having him in the top six. So I expect Robertson to not really factor in here either by being traded or by, being deprioritized down the lineup once again.
Yep, for sure. I mean, I don't have much on Bobby McMahon. Josh, actually, A&G Josh is talking to me about Bobby McMahon. We drafted him in we're in the Cupful Dynasty League, and we got Bobby McMahon like way late just for fun. I mean, this guy's 28, but yeah, he's, minors eligible on Fantrax. I just think we saw Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi play top six roles last year for a lot, and they really didn't have very good production. And now we've got Matthew Nyes and Bobby McMahon potentially, there. So we really have to temper expectations. These guys aren't going to do much unless there's massive injuries or they, become an amazing third line and they start just cooking. But yeah, Bobby McMahon, 15 goals, that'd be all right.
Right, the defenseman here, as we've already alluded to, Morgan Riley and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I have Riley for 8 goals, 48 assists, 56 points. You got him for 9 goals, 51 assists, 60 points. I've got Ekman-Larsson for 8 goals, 31 assists, 39 points. You've got him for 8 goals, 28 assists, 36 points. I think I probably have Ekman-Larsson for a little bit more power play time just because I kind of feel like at some point he's going to get a little bit of a look on the top power play, just whenever it's not clicking for a week, and then he'll go back to normal again. So I think that's probably the difference. I actually have Ekman-Larsson for 16 power play points, which feels hot.
Oh
What do you
my.
have him for there?
12.3 is what I got.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's the difference between us for sure. If you're into Riley as being the surefire top power play quarterback for the entire season, then you're probably more in line with Blake's 60-point projection. If you're not as sure, you're probably more in line with my 56. You got anything to really add there on Riley or Ekman-Larsson, Blake?
Riley, to me, is going to be a little bit value in fantasy drafts. I think, people aren't valuing him the way they should, I think, because of this signing here of Oliver Ekman-Larsson and what he was able to do in Florida last year, which wasn't that much, actually. Like, yeah, he played like a lot of time on the power play and he only got 11 power play points. So it's nothing crazy, right? I don't think this is a true threat to Morgan Riley. And I think that Toronto's power play could be a little bit better. And I think if that gets better, Morgan Riley is going to get more points. And I think Riley is like, I've got him for 60 points and I feel pretty damn good about that.
All right. Let's move on to our top 3 targets for this team. For myself, Tavares has to be the top target just because I think he's going to be the guy that people are most worried about after the 65-point season last year. Mitch Marner, number 2, if you buy that contract year narrative. And then Austin Matthews, just because he is Austin Matthews and he is that dude. Blake, who do you got?
Yeah, you know what? I've got a list here: Matthews, Nylander, and Morgan Riley. But I sort of like your reasoning better, so I'm going to go with yours. I like John Tavares. I think that makes total sense. That's a guy you're going to get at value this season. He's center only, so keep that in mind. But yeah, big time bounce back there. And Mitch Marner, the narrative, we talked about that, and then Morgan Riley. Obviously, like I just said, I'm excited about a 60-point player that you can get at value.
All right, let's keep rolling. Let's talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning. Definitely some changes here that we've already alluded to with the Sergachev departure. Also, Captain Steven Stamkos leaves. Anthony Duclair, who was a midseason pickup for them, he's gone in the offseason as well. Key additions here, obviously the big one, Jake Gensel, who they traded for and then signed to a massive deal. He purports to be on the top line now with Kucherov and Point, and that obviously has massive fantasy implications. JJ Moser comes over in the Sergachev trade to somewhat replace at least Sergachev's minutes.
Mhm.
And Cam Atkinson, a little bit of a secondary signing there, but they definitely needed a little bit of veteran scoring help throughout this lineup. So Atkinson feels like a Tampa Bay player, born and bred, where he will just fit in and do exactly what John Cooper wants these guys to do. How do you feel about the additions here for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and how do you feel the team looks overall, having lost a few key players as well?
Um, it's hard to ever count Tampa Bay out because of their elite offensive talent, and you got Hedman on the back end, and you've got Vasi in net, right? They've got elite options at all positions, but it seems a lot thinner to me, right? And then if you dig in a little bit on some of the metrics of Tampa Bay last year, defensively, they were not very good. They gave up a lot of chances. They obviously gave up a lot of goals. Vasilevsky did not have a good year, right? So that's a big piece there. But they just didn't look like the same kind of team that, the Stanley Cup caliber team, right? I feel like they're kind of on fumes a little bit, some of these guys. But I mean, when you got a player like Nikita Kucherov out there, like anything can happen, right? This guy's, one of the top 5 players in the league. So I'm still in on Tampa Bay, but I feel like they've got less to work with this year. I do like the Gensel signing though a lot. Like if you're going to lose the captain, Steven Stamkos, Gensel to me could potentially be a better version of that at this point in their careers.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Tampa Bay has fallen off a little bit, obviously, from their Stanley Cup winning years. 2021-22, they had 110 regular season points. 22-23 down to 98, and 98 again last year. And it's worth questioning whether this team is quite at that level as the rest of the elites in the East anymore. One thing that will keep them in the conversation, though, is John Cooper. Mentioned Bruce Cassidy being a top 5 NHL coach. I think John Cooper has to be a top 5, maybe a top 1 NHL coach. Definitely highly regarded around the league, and he'll keep the ship on track. I have no doubt, no matter who the players are, he will get the most out of them, and he'll make this team as good as it possibly can be. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Blake, but I've got a world of respect for Cooper, especially after watching the Leafs play Cooper's teams in the playoffs multiple years.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not much you can say on the man. Although, I mean, and this is not really good analysis, but sometimes a coach's time is just up, and like I could see if Tampa Bay comes out the gate like really stinky, like regardless of what Cooper's been able to do with his team, like it's legendary. I'm not that he would get fired, but like I could see him kind of losing the room a little bit and them needing a fresh voice in there at some point, maybe, this season or next season if Tampa Bay falters out the gate.
If that happens, the Leafs should fire Brube immediately and
Let's
sign John
go.
Cooper.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, let's talk about the power play here. Obviously, true top power play. You've got Nikita Kucherov, you've got Braden Point, you've got Victor Hedman, you've got Jake Gensel. They're absolutely locked in. Not a chance any of those guys is off the top power play for any time period that they're healthy next year. But the fourth forward here is definitely up for grabs. Brandon Hagel versus Nick Paul. I think we might have projected this one a little bit differently based on some of the conversations we've
Mhm.
had. Blake, who do you got here?
I like Hagel there. I mean, I'm not, it's not with a bullet or anything like that. Like it's going to be Hagel 100%. Like it could be anybody. They got Cam Atkinson in there. Like he can do stuff on the power play, right? They got Nick Paul. So I do think Hagel has the edge though, to me, just because of what they've got invested in this player. What he's capable of doing, his actual skill level, and what he brings to the table. And then I like to reference just what they did in the playoffs there. Like, when they were their season was on the line, they had this guy out there for a 73% power play share, doing stuff. And I just like Hagel and I like his game. So I think it makes sense for him to be there, but I don't feel I'm feeling like 60% confident there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anyone should feel like totally confident about it, but Nick Paul did spend the vast majority of the season
Mhm.
there, so I've got him for 2 minutes 45 seconds power play time on ice, and I've got Hegel for 2 minutes 25 seconds. Yeah, Hegel notably has never really been a strong power play contributor, even when he's been there.
Yep.
His highest season so far was 2022-23, and he had 13 power play points, and he was getting more run, obviously, on the top power play in that season. Yeah, overall, I just don't find that I'm gonna be super excited about Hegel. Obviously, it's a benefit to his usage if he's going to be on the top power play alongside Kucherov. Maybe there's an untapped ceiling here, and probably if you're just looking across, if you're looking at Tampa Bay just as a team, definitely Hagel purports to be the player who has the most to gain here, right? From potentially being on the top power play. So, from that perspective, probably the player you want to get the most excited about. But I just want to caution people that this might just be a player who's just not that efficient. And even if he is on the top power play, it may not be quite as amazing as everybody expects it to be. All right, let's dig into the projections then. Braden Point kicks us off. I've got him for 45 goals, 42 assists, 87 points. You have him for 43 goals, 46 assists, 89 points. Braden Point feels like one of the most consistent players in the NHL year to year. I don't think anybody should be surprised by a projection like this.
Not at all. He's he's like a mini Draisaitl, right? Like look his shooting percentage over the last couple of years. Like he had 20.2 last year, and then the year before that, 21.7. Jeez. I mean, this guy's uber efficient, and he's obviously the recipient of some amazing passes from Nikita Kucherov. I think again, like you said, he's a really safe player, and he's got that access to the power play, and he's a big part of that power play. So I feel good about this player.
For sure. Jake Gensel next up. This one obviously going to be a little bit tougher to project just because of arriving on a new team and what can we realistically think that his role will be. Does he stay on the top line left wing all season long? I think you have to assume that based on the contract they gave him. But yeah, definitely more question marks than usual for a player of this caliber. 40 goals, 41 assists, 81 points for me. 41 goals, 47 assists, 88 points for you. Talk to me about the ceiling case here that you see for Gensel. This is the player that we have the biggest difference on.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is everything I projected, I feel like is kind of in line with his regular numbers, right? And I loved what I was able to see when he went to Carolina and he was able to produce on a completely different team away from Sid Crosby, which was a little bit of a narrative with this player. Like, oh yeah, he's good because he plays with Sidney Crosby, right? Well, no, actually, like he's a pretty damn good player. Like goals, chance generation. You look into even zone entries and things that I'm into, like he does that as well, right? And so now you're putting him with players like that are probably the best line he's ever played with. Like, yeah, he played with Sid Crosby as one of the all-timers, but now he's going to play with Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point. Like, sheesh. I think, we have to temper expectations a tiny bit. Like maybe his IPP drops a little bit because he's playing with such elite players, right? And he's not expected to do maybe what he's done on other teams. But Jimmy Crack Corn, and I don't care. I love the opportunity. I think he's going to get a ton of minutes, and he's a lock on that power play.
Yeah, that's interesting. I am interested actually in what you've got the IPP at for him. I assume we're probably pretty close to in line on the shooting percentage and things there, but I've gone for 65% IPP at even strength and 54% on the power play.
Yeah, I got 64 at even strength, and I gave him 61 on the power play.
Okay, so a little bit more on the power play there. I've got 16 minutes time on ice at even strength and 345 on the power play.
Yep, same, exact same.
Nice. All right. So, yeah, maybe a little bit more on a shooting percentage you're projecting for him there. And that's probably fair. I could probably bump this up a little bit. I definitely feel like there's not a really strong reason why Gensel should be much below point per game pace. And definitely, I think there's a scenario in which he pops off for 90 plus this year for the first time. Yeah, it's all within the realm of possibility. But it's also hard to expect him to have a huge IPP on when he's consistently on the ice with a guy like Nikita Kucherov, who just hogs the puck
Yes.
for a very good reason. Speaking of Kucherov, 40 goals, 86 assists, 126 points is my projection. 41 goals, 88 assists, 129 points is Blake's projection. I don't know if there's much that really needs to be said about Nikita Kucherov. He's going to skate a ridiculous amount of ice time, both at even strength and on the power play, and he's going to be very efficient the entire time he's on the ice.
I love it. Just one of the best power play performers on the planet as well. I love Nikita Kucherov. I love doing this projection. Where do you see him being drafted? Like, where are you comfortable drafting Kuch this year?
I think you're probably still going McDavid, McKinnon, and Matthews 1, 2, 3, just because, yeah, the uniqueness of what those guys offer. But then Kucherov with the winger eligibility, and he's going to be right there, gets a little bit more of his fantasy value from the assists, which puts him that kind of tier behind Matthews in my mind. But then I think he is the number 4 player for me, pretty much without question.
Yep, I tend to agree there.
All right, let's move on. Anthony Cirelli should probably center the second line here, but it's probably not going to be super relevant for fantasy purposes. I have him for 18 goals, 25 assists, 43 points. Blake has him for 17 goals, 29 assists, 46 points. I don't know if you've got a lot on Cirelli, but it feels like, yeah, there's just obstacles to him getting power play one, which is probably what he'd need to see to really have some sustained relevance. I guess you could say that maybe if Hagel goes to the top line at some point and Gensel comes down to play with Cirelli, that could give him a little bit of a boost. But even so, I don't think that's enough to propel him into significant fantasy relevance.
Yeah, he's just never been able to get over the hump. And I mean, he's been playing with Stamkos a lot last season here, like, and that equaled a 45-point season, which is his career high, right? In 79 games. This guy is not a great fantasy producer. He's a great 2C. He's a defensive center that helps the defenseman, retrieve the puck and get it out and get it into the hands of players that can do stuff. Like on his line, Brandon Hagel, right? That's the guy who's going to be rushing it in and doing stuff. I'm never going to be excited about Anthony Cirelli. And even the periffs aren't amazing. Oh, actually, what am I talking about? The guy had 80 blocks last year. 80 blocks for a forward. I'm loving that. So if he gets anywhere near there, I mean, we're looking at a really nice streamer when Tampa Bay has a good schedule.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can definitely be a streamer, especially in like a Bangers Cats. If you want to get some blocks out of a forward, that also gives you a little bit more points upside than a defenseman might. That might be a way you can look. Brandon Hagel here, we've already talked a little bit about that potential power play role, but I have him for 25 goals, 41 assists, 66 points. You have him for 29, 44, going to 73. Obviously, a good size projection for him on your side. Is it just the power play I'm interested? I said I have him for 11.4 power play points. What do you have him for there, Blake?
19.5.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I really do think that even if he doesn't get top power play the whole time, like, we could see more than he had a minute and 11 average power play time on ice last year. I think he's going to beat that, right? And he was able to get 7 power play points last year. I think we double that, right? We have to double that to some degree. I mean, I don't know. Sorry, what did you have for power play points again, Nate? Because now I'm talking Yang on your projection.
11.4.
All right. You didn't double it and you're wrong, Nate. All right. What are you doing? Oh my God. How much power play time on ice did you give him?
2 minutes, 15 seconds, 45% IPP.
Oh damn! You obviously hate Brandon Hagel. All right, it's a problem. I don't know. I gave him a 52% IBP on the power play. I feel decent about that. But yeah, it's just power play production at this point. This guy's great at even strength. He's a great even strength performer, no question. Like 68 points at even strength last year. That's pretty damn nice. And he looked good doing it. This guy, again, zone entries, love it. Chance assists, shot assists, all that stuff. He does it in spades, right? So if he can get himself with some better teammates or on that power play one, then I think, we could see these projections come to life.
Yeah. Yeah, I have him down at that lower IPP just because it's been fairly consistent throughout his career that he's just been kind of unable to be a significant part of the power
Yep.
play. 41% last year for Tampa and 50% the year before. Going back to Chicago, where he had 110 minutes on the power play in 2021-22, he had a 33% IPP there.
Ew.
So yeah, he's just never been an effective player on the power play, and so that's what's holding down his projection for me. Certainly that could change. Obviously the setup of that power play is going to change with Stamkos out of there and Gensel coming in. So maybe there's a role for Hagel now that prioritizes what he's able to do a little bit more, and they do go with him because of that. Like, there's definitely scenarios in which he pays off, and yeah, if there is a player here who could significantly exceed my projection, it would have to be Hagel for that reason. Nick Paul obviously could have some fantasy relevance if he does stick on the top power play, even though he's probably not going to be super efficient there either. I have him for 21 goals, 19 assists, 40 points. You have him for 19 goals, 21 assists, and 40 points. So pretty much in line there, but definitely not a player you're excited about. And if he's not on the top power play, you're going to have no interest.
I remember last year, like Nick Paul's on the power play, and I think he got a hat trick in the first week or the second week, and you're like, this guy's blast off. He's a must add. You got to get Nick Paul. And then, yeah, he literally had a 65% power play share and got 14 power play points on the best power play in the league. Buddy, what are you doing? Oh man, like I mean, he's like he's a big boy, right? 6'3", 229. The guy standing in front of the other goalie. That's what he's doing. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense him being out there. I hope they don't do it again for fantasy. Because if this guy's on the top power play, he's still not even really rosterable. He's a good streamer, right? But it's not anything you could bank on.
Yep. Victor Hedman, let's go to the defense. Victor
Oh, yeah.
Hedman going to be that dude once again. I have him for 16 goals, 60 assists, 76 points. You have him for 14 goals, 62 assists, also 76 points. Really think that with Sergachev out of town, it's once again wheels up for Hedman. Doesn't have quite the peripheral production he once did, but he should be over 200 shots with close to a hit and a block per game. Maybe a little bit more on the block side there. Talk to me about Hedman. Obviously, we're both very high on him in terms of the point production, and I'm willing to draft him in the third round with, pretty much every time I'll take him in the third round if he's there.
Yeah, I love me some Hedman. Made me look good last year. I think we were all 50-50 on Hedman Sergachev, and I was like 51-49 with Hedman. And so I feel good about that. And he obviously like paid off. This guy had a massive season last year. And what's even better this season, no Sergachev, right? There's no one coming for his minutes on the power play. And obviously the power play is where he eats. This guy cooked for 31 power play points last year after 14 in that previous season, right? Where everyone's like, is Hedman done? No, he was tired. All right. He was extremely tired and he was resting. All right. And Sergachev got to eat. But with the access to that power play, he's back. He's ready to go. I'm excited about Hedman.
Yeah, definitely on board for some Hedman love this year. Do you have any love for JJ Moser? Obviously, the guy coming over to try to replace some of Sergachev's minutes. 7 goals, 27 assists, 34 points for me. 7 goals, 30 assists, 37 points for you. Got him a little bit higher, but I find it really hard to get excited about Moser. Do you think he is the second power play guy? That's the way I have it now, which gets him to 8 power play points for me. Or do you think that somebody else could take that role?
I don't know. It's either him or Darren Radish. And
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
I guess I'll take Moser because I've heard of him a lot more than Darren Radish. So yeah, okay, Moser's getting the second power play. Great. He gets to play with, Cam Atkinson. God, I don't know. But yeah, I if Hedman goes down, then I think Moser goes to top power play, right? Or they do a 5 forward and just get out of their minds. I don't even know because none of these defensemen really make a lot of sense. Moser did get some power play time in Arizona. So he's done it before and he'll do it again. All right. When Hedman retires, Moser, thank you. Thank you for your service.
All right, so let's round it out with our top 3 targets. For me, number 1 is Victor Hedman. Number 2 is Brandon Hagel for that potential upside if he does manage to stick on power play 1 all year. And then number 3, Jake Gensel. Just the little bit of unknown there. I think I'm feeling safe with around a point per game projection, but I do think there's upside for maybe 90 plus points.
Yep. No, my list is exactly the same as yours. This is what you call synergy, folks. All right. We've been doing this a long time. Nate and I are together on this. We're one mind. Apples and Genos, it's basically just one think tank, just pushing stuff out. That sounds terrible. I don't even know where I'm going with that. But I think obviously we're stoked on Tampa again this year. Schedule-wise, Tampa's not too good, though, are they? They've got pretty low number of off nights. So guys like Brandon Hagel maybe lose a little bit of value there because you might not be able to get them in. And they're not fringe players, but you might have better left wingers that you've drafted earlier. So something to think about with Tampa.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the other thing, just thinking about the depth on this team, like this is one team where an injury to a single player could actually actively cripple everyone's upside. Like, obviously, it's Nikita Kucherov that stirs the drink there. If Kucherov were to go down to injury, obviously, we hope that doesn't happen. But it's worth noting that this team is perilously thin if that were to happen, and it would significantly affect everyone's upside if that did happen. Worth at least noting that there is that downside case. You might not think it's super likely, but it should be at least noted and maybe used as a tiebreak if you've got 2 guys you think are exactly the same that you're comparing side by side. If one of them is one of those peripheral players on Tampa, then it could be something that you use to tiebreak. All right, let's talk about the St. Louis Blues. Obviously, they moved on from Craig Berube, and things were kind of better, kind of the same. Key departures for them: Kevin Hayes, Torrey Krug, potentially. I haven't seen any true updates,
Mhm.
but he was diagnosed. I think they called it a pre-arthritic condition. And they're kind of trying to see what needs to be done there. There's potentially misses the entire season. For my money, if they're already talking about that at this point, that seems like the most likely scenario. And that's the way that I have it projected at the moment is that Torrey Krug does miss the entire season. If he doesn't, then he probably is on the top power play and pretty fantasy relevant, just even as a streamer in some cases. Key additions here, really nothing much. Radek Faksa comes in to center the third line. Alexandre Texier was a pickup, and then they picked up both of the Joseph brothers, Pierre Olivier and Matthew Joseph,
Oh,
both
I
come
thought
to
it was
town.
Joseph Brothers. I was like, who the hell is Joseph Brothers? I don't know that player, but I got to look him up.
Yeah, Joseph Brothers goes well with Jake Neighbors.
There you go. Hey, neighbor.
Both of the, both of these guys should perform well together. Honestly, this feels like a team that didn't do a whole lot this offseason, feels a little bit stuck in neutral to be.
Mhm.
And that's a tough place to be because it does feel like some of those scenarios tend to go south more often than they go north. I don't know if you feel differently about that, Blake.
Yeah, it's just again not a team I'm very excited about, save for their top line, and I don't know, maybe another player, but yeah, it's just I didn't like the coaching change there, and we'll talk about coaching in a second here, but it wasn't anything that made a big difference, right? So now we have a full offseason with the new coach, and we'll see what happens. But this is a team that lives off efficiency, and we don't like that here, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens if they stop scoring? All right, now we've got the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah. So let's talk about that coaching change. Drew Bannister promoted from interim to head coach. He did take over after Craig Berube was let go, and the team was kind of instantly less effective for fantasy purposes after Berube left, which is not what you want to see as a fantasy manager. So I have baked that in to my projections. I'm sure you have as well, Blake, but I am concerned. It's not a
Yeah.
team that has a lot of truly exciting pieces. There's no like true elite talent here. We've got some very good players for sure, but not a lot of elite talent to go around. Not the kind of team that feels like it can weather the storm of a coach who might kind of hold them back, whether intentionally through like low event hockey, like we talked about with Brube at times, or just by virtue of potentially not being a terrific NHL head coach. Hard to say. Obviously, it's early days for Drew Bannister, but this is a coaching change that I'm not excited about in terms of fantasy.
Yeah, I did an interesting exercise this offseason here, just looking at some teams that had a coaching change during the season and then compared, before and after, and just team metrics, right? And St. Louis was one of the ones where I was like, oh god. I mean, they actually had less shot attempts per 60 at 5-on-5. They had less goals for, and they gave up more scoring chances against, right? They actually did get a little bit better in their shooting percentage, but one thing that did get better under Bannister was their power play, and marginally.
Mm-hmm.
Their power play got marginally better. So that's great for fantasy, right? But we talked about this before in our last episode as well. Like when you have a coaching change mid-season, it's really hard to just wipe the slate clean and say, hey, we're starting all new systems, everybody. So I think the way that St. Louis comes out is going to be the true test of Drew Bannister and what he's bringing to the table. And the truth is, we don't really know as of yet, but the early reviews are in and they stink.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the power play here. Again, a true top power play. You've got Rob Thomas, you got Pavel Buchnevich, you got Jordan Kyrou. They are locked in, but you do have questions around the power play quarterback and fourth forward slots. For the fourth forward, I think it's got to be Jake Neighbors or Braden Shen. For my money, it's got to be Jake Neighbors for the most part. Braden Shen could work in there at times. Jake Neighbors still young. He could piss off the coach at some point
Yeah.
and get himself demoted, but Neighbors was Bannister's favorite, I will say. Basically, from the time Bannister took over, Jake Neighbors did kind of take over that role on the power play, and so I'm projecting it pretty much that he's going to see a full complement of minutes. I've got him at 2 minutes 45 seconds, so a tad under what you might expect a true top power play all season long guy to do on a team like St. Louis. Is that the way you see it, Blake?
No, but I gave him more. I gave him more power play
Okay.
time. But I mean, yours makes a little bit more sense now that I'm hearing it. I gave him three. I gave him 3 minutes, but I mean, we got a new, like basically a new coach in here. He might throw those power play lines in a blender. I could see him doing that, right? So maybe I could shave a little bit of time off the power play there for Jake Neighbors. But yeah, to me, it's Jake Neighbors, no question.
All right. And then on the back end, Justin Volk versus Scott Perunovich is an interesting conversation. Perunovich has long been touted as this offensive defenseman. He's dealt with some injuries, has never really broken through to any extent at the NHL level. And when I looked through his power play numbers, I was significantly underwhelmed. I know part of that was being on a second power play unit that wasn't very good, but even when he's gotten looks on the top unit, it's not been great results for Perunovich. So for my money, I'm leaning a little bit back towards Justin Falk to take most of those minutes. I have Falk. It's not like I'm leaning a whole lot his way, but I have
Yep.
Falk for 2 minutes 45 seconds. I have Perunovich for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So literally a 15-second difference between them. How do you see it, Blake?
Yeah, I gave it 2 minutes 45 for Falk and like 2 minutes and 20 seconds for Perunovich, right? Let's not
Yeah.
get cute, folks. Like Perunovich has done nothing to earn that spot. He's not just going to get it out of camp because he's Scott Perunovich, right? I think Falk makes sense. It's not inspiring, that's for damn sure, but Falk has done it before. He has a bit of tenure there, and I think he can run that power play no problem. So I think let's be smart, and I do like Falk as a little bit of value this year.
Yeah, I will note as well that over the last part of the season, it was Falk who was getting the most power play time, the biggest power play share. So I do expect that to continue, at least to start the season. Prunovich could take that step this year finally, but it's not something I'm willing to bank a whole lot on
Mhm.
at this point.
Yep.
Let's dig into the projections here. Rob Thomas, I have for 25 goals, 64 assists, 89 points. You have him for 26 goals, 59 assists, and 85 points. Rare player that I have projected above you, Blake.
I
What's
love
going
it.
on here?
You know what? Yeah, I always love when I see a projection that I'm a little bit lower on than you. So there you go. Robert Thomas, I'm not crazy. I'm just somebody. Um, yeah, I'll never get excited about Rob Thomas, and that's going to hurt me. You know what I mean? Because this guy's pretty damn good. 86 points in 82 games last year, buddy. Well done. And this team stinks. So yeah, I like Robert Thomas. I like first off, the deployment is crazy. He kills a lot of penalties. He actually gets some shorthanded points here and there. Great on the power play last year. So yeah, I think it's just the way it came out. I wasn't trying to do anything, funny with Robert Thomas's projection. I feel like this is just where the numbers came out. And yeah, I don't mind that projection at all.
All right, let's talk about Pavlovich Navich. 30
Pavel
goals for me.
Bitchnavich. Oh my God.
Buchnevich.
Upsy doodle. Oh,
We don't say
Bitchnavooch.
those. We
No.
wouldn't say such
No, that's
things
a
on
female dog. That's a thing. You know what I mean? That's not a swear word. We're not putting an explicit tag on this, folks.
Buchnevich, 30 goals, 45 assists, 75 points for me. Also higher than you, Blake. You have him for 31 goals, but 43 assists for 74 points. So clearly you hate Buchnevich. Please come to let us know why you despise this man so much.
I don't. All right. I'm giving him a bump. This guy had 63 points in 80 games, and I'm saying, how about 74, Buchnevich? You go to town, buddy. You have a Coke and a smile. But again, this is a player that lives on off efficiency, right? As St. Louis does. And I hate that. And we called this guy for a bit of a bust last year, and he hit as a bust. So I'm not stoked on it. Like he could spend some time on the second line too. I don't know what Drew Bannister's going to do there. Like, he can flip around. So it's just not a player I'm excited about. He does get good power play time but only 18 power play points last year. So it's just mid. He's a mid player to me. And, if you're in the back half of your draft and Buchnevich is sitting there, like maybe I'm into it. But again, like St. Louis does not have a very good fantasy schedule, right? They've got an insane amount of, or they don't have very many off nights. So why am I going out of my way to get Buchnevich? I'd rather get Jordan Kyrou or even Robert Thomas.
Yeah, I think those are fair points, but I will say that, like, I think Buchnevich is flying well under the radar at this point. I think when people hear the name Buchnevich, they think 60-point guy. They think more of what he did last year. So having a projection that's significantly above what he did last year for both of us is actually pretty bullish in my mind, where I feel like I'm probably going to get a 70 plus point guy in like the 10th plus round in some cases. And yeah, I'll be absolutely fine with that. Yeah, I have him for 75 points, 21.6 power play points, over 200 shots. He's not going to kill you in the hits department. So I don't think that Buchnevich is like the guy you have to have for fantasy in 2024-25. But I think that you're going to get like decent production. And he's going to be one of those guys that I just feel like is not going to be a miss for you at the end of the year the way that he was last year. I think he's going to rebound. He actually kind of solidified some underlying rates for me last year, and it was more on the efficiency side of things where he underperformed. I think that bounces back. He gets a little bit better in the luck metrics, more towards his career averages, and we actually have a pretty serviceable fantasy season for him this year.
I like that. You sold me, buddy. Let's get some Pavel Buchnevich.
Let's also get some Jordan Kyrou in here. I have him for 35 goals, 38 assists, 73 points. You have 36 goals, 39 assists, and 75 points. Both of us like this player. Definitely not a guy you're going to target in your bangers leagues. 16 hits is the projection I
Man.
have and 31 blocks. But he is up there with 262 shots for me. So definitely a guy who likes to shoot, has been a guy who has not been prioritized, like feels like a little bit what William Nylander was for a while in Toronto. Feels like one of these players that coaches don't always love for whatever reason and struggles to get a full role. Did seem like Bannister was okay with him though, and for the most part played him on this top line and gave him basically all the even strength minutes he needed to provide good fantasy value. I'm pretty in line with Kyrou. I'm not convinced there's really a ceiling beyond this for Kyrou. I think we're kind of seeing what this player is, and I feel good about the projection, but I don't see him as suddenly breaking out to a brand new level.
Yeah, no, I mean, we need some more efficiency here for Jordan Kyrou, and it's just not exactly there. But I love the underlying with Jordan Kyrou. We always have, right? This is a shot and chance generator to the max. I love that, and I do like the sort of progression that he had last year, where he was under fire and, he's tearing up in interviews and stuff like that. And then comes out the other side and actually has a pretty damn nice last quarter of the season. Like he had 20 points in his last 21 games, including 12 goals. Pretty damn nice. And, I think this is a player that is going to be extra motivated coming into the year. This is the player that I'm targeting on St. Louis, if there is any. I love the right wing, and I just like what he brings to the table. But yeah, like you said, we can't just go out and project some massive breakout over, what do we have here? Like 72 points, or I've got him for 74. You've got him for 73. Like, yeah, that is about as comfortable as I'm willing to go with this player. But I mean, if he can start, converting a little bit more, bam, I think this could be a 40 goal player. No problem.
Yeah, definitely a good shooting percentage season, and you could see Kyrou hit the 40 goal mark with relative ease. Maybe what would that have to be, like a 2 or 3% bump, and he hits 40 goals based on my current projection. So don't see that as out of the range of possibilities either.
Hey, Nate, quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry, before you move on, Jordan Kyrou or Cole Caulfield? What do you think about those two players?
Very similar in a lot of
Yeah.
respects. Big time shot and chance generators, not a lot of peripherals, but definitely going to shoot a ton. I think I would probably take Caulfield just for the little bit of the unknown there. My projection for Caulfield, spoiler alert, is above the projection that I have for Kyrou at the moment. I think there's a better chance that Caulfield has that shooting percentage outlier season than Kyrou does, and that's kind of what sways it for me. But definitely very, very similar
Yeah,
players in a
they're
lot of respects.
comparable, right? And I think Kyrou is going way later because I've seen Kyrou or
Yeah,
Caulfield going in the 4th round in like our best balls and stuff like that, right? And maybe just
that's
people doing positional scarcity, but Kyrou's a right winger as well. So it's just something to think about. I find that interesting. I think they're very comparable players.
Yep. I don't mind that comparison at all. Braden Shen is next up. Pretty uninspiring player,
Oh
but
God.
definitely going to have some fantasy relevance, if only as a streamer. 22 goals, 25 assists, 47 points for me. Similar for you, 22 goals, 24 assists, and 46 points. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time here, but this is a guy who is going to generate somewhere around 150 hits, so he's going to do that for you, and he's going to have respectable numbers. Yeah, we're neither of us are projecting that he's going to be on the top power play unit for a whole lot of time, but he should be the next guy in line if somebody were to go down to injury. So there is that element to Shen as well, where he could outperform this by virtue of getting a little bit more power play time at some point in the season. So definitely a player you should be aware of, but definitely also not a player that you're expecting to suddenly pop for 60, 65 points.
Yeah, I don't have a lot on Shen there, but something I do take into consideration sometimes is the captain of the team, right? And there's some extra motivation there. Like, it's not that he's going to blast off, but I think being the captain of the team gives him a really good floor. And I remember too in the season, all my cream exchanges that I did, the buy lows and sell highs, I would be talking about selling high on Braden Shen so many times because he was like this, like peaks and valleys all year, like nothing for 10 games, and then he'd explode for 10 games. So it's just a frustrating player. But yeah, like you said, I think the main value here comes if there's an injury and he gets moved up the lineup.
Right. Next up, Brandon Saad. Not going to be excited about this player. 20
No.
goals, 18 assists, 38 points for me. 21 goals, 16 assists, 37 points for you. Don't think we need to spend a lot of time there, but a guy who's going to be a role player could get hot at some point through the season, could just be a streamer in a deeper league for you at some point. Player that I think we're both more excited about the potential of is Jake Neighbors. I have him for 25 goals, 18 assists, 43 points. You have him for 28 goals, 23 assists, 52 points. This is the player that we have the biggest disparity on, so we should dig in there a little bit. First off, just your overall feel on the player, Blake. Do you think that this is a player on the ascent? Do you think he's got another step that he's going to take this year?
I do. And I like something that you mentioned already is that this was kind of Bannister's guy towards the end of the season. Like he was getting buku minutes. Like again, last quarter of the season, his time on ice went up by about a minute, just over a minute. He was getting power play one for the last half of the season, which I think sticks as well. So we're looking at a top 6 power play one player right here. And you can get him where? Like way late in your drafts, right? And he's a left winger. So I think there's some value there because we've determined that left wing is a weird, is a positionally scarce position. That's a terrible sentence. Oh my God. It's getting late, folks. All right. We're running up, coming up on 2 hours here. Anyways, yeah, I think that there's going to be lots of opportunity for this player. And I like what he does. He's got awesome periffs as well. 138 hits, 49 blocks in 77 games. I think that this is a player that can take a step this year.
Yeah, I definitely see that as within the range of outcomes here. Let's dig in a little bit. What did you do for the time on ice here? I've got him for 16 minutes, 45 seconds average time on ice.
Yeah, I've got him for 17, just over 17 and a half.
Okay, so you've definitely given him a little bit of a boost there. That could account for a little bit of it. 57% IPP, 9.5% on ice shooting percentage at even strength is what I've got him booked down for at the moment.
I gave him 63 IPP and 9.76. So
Okay.
a little bit higher on both of those.
And on the shot generation side, in total, I have him for 171 shots. Do you have him for more than that to get to the 28 goals?
Yeah. 188.
Okay. So a few more there. I think we see the power play relatively similarly. So I don't think we'll have too much difference there. So you're just a little bit more ambitious at even strength and
Yeah.
probably giving him a little bit bigger share of the power play as well, which I could definitely see. It's a little bit more of a bullish case for a player coming into his own another year into the league, but I can definitely see it. And Neighbors is a guy that if someone takes a larger step than expected this year, I really do think Neighbors has to be the odds-on favorite to do so. Most of the other guys that we talked about so far, I kind of feel like I know exactly who
Yeah.
the player is, and I'm not expecting a big variance from this projection on any of them the way I am with potentially Jake Neighbors here. All right, let's move on to the defenseman. we'll get the lesser guys out of the way first here. Colton Parayko does tend to have some fantasy relevance, does shoot a decent amount, and does hit, does provide a ton of blocks as well. So if you're into those categories, Parayko does provide some fantasy relevance there. But 7 goals, 20 assists, 27 points for me. Exact same for you, Blake. And then Perunovic, we kind of already talked about, but only 3 goals, 25 assists for 28 points is my projection. 3 goals, 30 assists, 33 points is your projection. He's not going to do a lot of hitting. His blocks are going to be just kind of average, and he basically does not shoot the puck, which is a major problem for fantasy purposes. So, literally no interest in Scott Brunovich outside of some sort of like 32 team league in my mind. Are we in lockstep on Parayko and Brunovich so far, Blake?
Yeah, streamers at best. I mean, if Falk goes down and Krug is out, Perunovic is your ad, right? It's no question, but it's just got to be Falk's power play.
Yeah. So getting to Falk, I do have him for 11 goals, 38 assists, 49 points. You have him for 10 goals, 34 assists, 44 points. So definitely I'm a little bit more ambitious about his potential here than you are. Let's try to dig in a little bit. I have him for 13.6 power play points. Where are you at there?
13.3.
Okay, so no difference on the power play. We both do see that role pretty similarly, assuming Krug is out at the moment with the information we do have now. What do you have for the even strength time on ice? I've got him for 18 minutes, 15 seconds.
I gave him more. So I gave him
Okay.
19.2. Yeah.
All right, so you're definitely lower on the efficiency there then. I have him for 44% IPP. I have him for 10% on ice shooting percentage.
I gave him at even strength 40% IPP and 9.73 on ice shooting percentage.
Okay, so that's where he's starting to tick down for you. And then the shots for, I have at 31 shots for per 60. So you must have that lower.
31 shots for per 60. What do you? Oh, right. At even strength.
Yes.
That's a good question. Yes, I've got 30.
Okay. So yeah, basically, yeah. What is that, like 10% ish down?
I'll let you do math, Nate. All right.
On the IPP, and then a little bit less than that on the base rate, and then on the conversion. Yeah, it all works out to a little bit of a difference, 5 points total at even strength between the two of us. Overall, I guess I'm just kind of pretty in on Falk, assuming Krug is out for the season. 189 shots is what I have him for, 105 hits, 133 blocks. He's going to do all that for you. It's not going to blow the doors down, but he's going to provide value there and be above replacement level there. And if he does get power play one, he's going to be above replacement level in terms of the point production as well. So he doesn't have to have like a massive power play showing to get to this number for me.
Yep.
And that's kind of what puts me in the camp of firmly interested in Justin Falk for fantasy in 2024-25.
I'm absolutely with you, man. I think my projections is on the lower end for sure. There is zero risk in drafting Justin Falk. Like that's the piece that gets me excited about Falk, because what do you have to lose? It's literally like, he's not power play one, see you later, right? But if he is power play one, like bang, we there's a 50 point ceiling, I think, with this player. Like, he got 50 points in 2022-23, right? He could do that again. He's also coming off a year where he was massively inefficient with a 1.5 shooting percentage. That's terrible. This is a double-digit goal guy, in my opinion. So that's really valuable from the back end as well. Plus, he's a B for crazy periffs. So, what do you got to lose? What do we have to do to get you into Justin Falk today? Yeah.
All right, Mr. Used Car Salesman. Let's talk about our top 3 targets here. Number 1 for me is Justin Falk for the reasons just described. Pavel Buchnevich, as I mentioned, I just think he's going to be undervalued, and so that's going to make him a target for me. You're going to get production that's going to live in your lineup all year long, and you're going to get it well after a lot of other players are going that are much less sure things. And then Jake Neighbors, just because he is the player that I see with the most upside above and beyond his current projection that I have for him. How do you see these things, Blake?
Yeah, I mean, those all make sense. I like your take on Buchnevich there for sure. That's a player I'll think about in drafts. Thanks a lot, Nate. I really appreciate that. But yeah, to me, number 1, is Jordan Kyrou. That's the player I'm looking for, because even just that Cole Caulfield conversation we had there, like to me, he's like Cole Caulfield that you can get like 5 rounds later or 4 rounds later. It's pretty damn nice. So yeah, I like that. Plus he's an old dancing boy. He's dancing out of the way it hits. He doesn't give a damn. He's been doing that for years. I'm digressing. Justin Falk is my number 2 for all the reasons we just mentioned. Again, major value there to me. And hey, neighbor, Jake Neighbors. That's the riskiest one, because yeah, it's a little bit of boomer bust, right? This guy had 27 goals last year on crazy efficiency. So we're expecting things to carry on the way it did last year, but we have to see it a little bit more to feel secure about that. So yeah, that's my list there, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I think the potential here for downside is really tied to Drew Bannister and what he might be able to do or might not be able to do, maybe more accurately, with a team that doesn't have a ton of truly elite talent. And then the upside, I don't really think there's a ton of upside here,
It's
right?
horrible.
Unless Bannister truly outperforms in year 2 and like gets these guys to play above what they've shown us so far. Yeah, I just think this is probably a team that you're not going to be excited about, but there might be a reason for that, and that might be what everybody else in your draft is thinking. And so, for that reason, you can probably sneak a bunch of these guys onto your roster late. If it doesn't work out, you're probably not going to be too sad about it, but you can probably get some decent value on a few of these names. All right. Well, if you've made it this far, you are officially a true fantasy hockey
Legend.
degenerate. Let us know in the comments what team you are most excited for in 2024-25 of this group. Blake, if I had to put it to you, which team gave you the most excitement when you're working through projections? You can say Toronto. It's okay.
Oh, I just got excited all over. I just got excited by you saying that, Nate. That's we'll take it offline. I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah, obviously Toronto's amazing, but I'm gonna say probably Utah, right?
Yeah.
Because just they've got some pieces in there. They've got some bits and pieces that it looks good to me. Like Dylan Genther really is a player that I'm excited about, and I think we'll be able to get at value. And yeah, it'll be a little bit of a swing, but I love what he's bringing to the table, and I do like what I said earlier with Utah being maybe refreshed, being in Utah, being with a professional organization instead of playing a dingus arena wherever the hell they were playing in Arizona there. Like, I think they're going to be stoked to be there, and that might equal a little bit of better product on the ice. So there you go.
Yep, I like that. Grab some Dylan Genther, grab a Pavel Buchnevich in the second round. You got the
Cool.
upside, you got the floor. Right side by side. I'm just going to ignore that and keep going. If you haven't heard, the Apples and Geos Patreon will go live for the new season on September 1st. $2 a month gets you access to patron only live shows this year. $8 a month gets you the live shows, but also gets you the patron only Discord channels, access to play in the patron league against myself. Unfortunately, you will probably lose.
That's true.
You also get access to my show notes, which Blake and I do every single week, going over the best weekly ads. That's what people are usually getting the most value out of, but also the other shows that I put together. And you're also going to get some exclusive Apples and Geos player evaluation tools, putting together all the metrics that we look at when we're talking through the players in season. You'll have access to that for yourself. The true degenerates may want to check out the Geno's tier. $15 a month gets you all those perks, plus every question you can possibly ask me, I will answer.
I'll tell you what, folks. Nate just jacked the price on the friendship experience as well. He's really gouging me here, but you know what? I'm really lonely and I have poor self-esteem. So, I'll pay whatever it takes. Just you'll be my friend, right, Nate?
Always and forever, buddy. Always
Oh,
and
thank you, buddy.
forever. While you're here, if you want to get in on more conversations like the friendship tier experience, you should check out the Apples and
Worth
Judas
it.
Discord. Close to 1,200 members we're at now, actually. And yeah, more joining every single day. And that's probably something to do with the best ball slow drafts that we have going. We're up to 28 best ball drafts at this point. People spending their real money to draft against each other in August. You love to see it. Putting together some of the best ADP you can possibly find on the internet because of that situation. If you made it all the way to the end, if you could leave a like, if you could rate the pod, if you could review the pod, if you could subscribe to the YouTube, if you could comment on this video, any or all of those things would mean a ton to us. It is the best way to support the channel. That's going to be all that we've got for this episode, though. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.